So welcome back to the future of global energy. Our next panel is entitled, Who Wins in Producing Hydrogen's Many-Colored Rainbow? As many of you know, hydrogen may be a colorless gas, but in the view of some, not all hydrogen is created equal, and a color is sometimes used to denote how clean it is. Today, almost all hydrogen production in the US is produced from natural gas through a process called steam methane reforming, and is considered gray because the CO2 is not captured. But in the future, that SMR process may be coupled with carbon capture to create blue hydrogen, a cleaner version produced from fossil fuels. As we've heard, green hydrogen may be produced through electrolysis of water by separating the hydrogen and oxygen molecules and using electricity from renewables to power the reaction. There's also the possibility of using nuclear energy to power electrolysis, in which case the hydrogen is considered pink. Or it might even be turquoise, which is somewhere between green and blue, and uses methane as a feedstock and electricity rather than fossil fuels as an energy source. So this rainbow is confusing. And even more confusing, electrolysis may not be necessarily the cleanest form of hydrogen. For example, a Bank of America research report recently reported that even in California, where the penetration of renewables is 32%, hydrogen produced from fossil fuels had lower carbon intensity than hydrogen produced from electrolysis. So we're going to need a lot of renewables to produce the greenest hydrogen from electrolysis. And this kind of raises a question. Should we be focused on the source of hydrogen production? Or is it better to focus on the most suitable way of reducing the carbon intensity of the hydrogen? Ultimately, many believe that electrolysis will be the best long-term low-carbon solution. But the cost of hydrogen produced from electrolysis is currently 5 times more expensive than that produced from fossil fuels. So last month, the Department of Energy created its Earthshot initiative, which sets an aspirational goal to reduce the cost of clean hydrogen by 80% to $1 per 1 kilogram in 1 decade, one by one by one. But is this enough to make green hydrogen both cost competitive and scalable? To take on these many complicated questions, we have a panel of experts representing a rainbow of types of hydrogen production. So I'd like to introduce our second panel and our moderator. Our panelists are Kathy Ayers, Vice President of Research and Development at Nel Hydrogen, Deia Bayoumi, Vice President of Product Management at Bloom Energy, Trevor Best, Chief Executive Officer at Syzygy Plasmonics, Andrew Garnett, Interim President, Air Liquide, U.S. Hydrogen Energy, Roman Kramarchuk, Head of Future Energy Analytics at S&P Global Platts, and our moderator, Nichelle McLemore, Managing Director, Oil, Gas, and Chemicals at Deloitte. Nichelle, thanks so much to you and Deloitte for all your support of the conference, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Brett. I'm looking forward to getting into the conversation today. As you said, and as the speakers have said in previous panels today and throughout the conference, hydrogen is a big topic, and Houston has an opportunity across all of the many colors, and in fact, all the ways that it's produced. So with that, let's start with an understanding of the different ways that hydrogen is produced. And I want to ask each of our panelists that question. I'll start with Kathy.
Sure. So at Nel Hydrogen, we produce hydrogen via electrolysis of water using low temperature technologies. There's also some higher temperature technologies that are not quite commercial yet. But our systems run around 60 to 80 degrees Celsius. As was mentioned in the introduction, most hydrogen is not made this way today, but there's been small niche markets where electrolysis has been cost effective over the years. And we're now seeing the point at which we can scale these technologies to a point where they can start to address some of the more energy related markets. So we're very focused on what was said in the beginning, reducing the cost of producing the hydrogen through both efficiency improvements to lower the operating cost and manufacturing improvements to lower the capital cost.
And we'll get into that certainly. Deia?
Yeah, thank you. Colors, as it mentioned in the introduction, are very helpful inside our shorthand tied to the power generation source and extent of the CO2 removal. The broad array of colors we have, the whole rainbow, quickly paint the picture of how many different ways clean hydrogen can be produced. So we have actually the gray hydrogen mentioned. We have the blue hydrogen, which is also created with natural gas, but the blue hydrogen means the resulting CO2 is either captured, stored, utilized in an industrial process. So from carbon accounting perspective, it becomes really carbon neutral. In Bloom, really, we focus a lot on green hydrogen, as green hydrogen is produced completely from renewable energy sources. It currently accounts for around 1% of all hydrogen produced in the world. We're also working a lot with demonstration with customer in pink hydrogen.
This meeting is being recorded.
Where the pink hydrogen utilizes actually electricity from nuclear energy to generate hydrogen through a process of the electrolysis. Electrolysis, when the electrical current runs through a water molecule, separating hydrogen and oxygen, of course. And we focus, like Kathy mentioned, the low temperature, we focus more in the high temperature one where higher efficiencies are really, really needed. And also we can capture the heat for complete reuse and focus more on manufacturing efficiency, lowering the cost and demonstration to really scale up the technology as well.
Great, thanks for that, Deia. Trevor?
Hello, Trevor Best with Syzygy Plasmonics. So we have a very unique approach to manufacturing hydrogen. Our technology is based on 30 years of research that was performed at Rice University by Professors Peter Nordlander and Professor Naomi Hollis. Our technology is based on photocatalysis, which means that we use light instead of heat from burning fossil fuel to perform reactions. In our reactor, we create that light using LEDs and renewable electricity. This gives us quite an advantage for a few reasons. One, our reactions happen at low pressure and low temperature. This means that we can build our reactors out of things like aluminum and glass and plastic, achieving a much, much lower capital cost. And perhaps most exciting, this is a platform technology. We can do more than a dozen different reactions. We have plays in ammonia synthesis for fertilizer, CO2 processing, and of course we have the capability of making hydrogen from multiple different feedstocks. Because of our low capex and our ability to use different feedstocks and the efficiency of our process, we do offer a potential to make clean hydrogen at a cost point that is far lower than many of our competitors in many scenarios. Where we are currently scaling up the technology. We've scaled up more than 500,000x in the last 36 months, and we are approximately 18 to 24 months from market entry and scaling. The potential is massive, and I'm very excited to be here today.
Thanks, Trevor. Andrew, let's get you in the conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Nichelle. Let me start by introducing Air Liquide. We are an industrial gas company, so we manufacture oxygen, nitrogen, argon. And we are one of the world's largest producers of hydrogen. Brett said it already, roughly 95% of the world's hydrogen today is made by steam methane reforming. And if we simplify that a little bit, that's taking natural gas, which is more or less 97, 98% methane, cracking that, that's CH4, cracking that apart and making hydrogen from that. That's primarily the way the Air Liquide makes hydrogen today. We also have electrolyzers and electrolysis, but in terms of energy, that method is the most efficient. It uses just a little bit less than 1/5 of an MMBTU per kilogram. And so depending on the cost of natural gas, it can be made at the DOE's target today of $1 a kilogram. And this method does have carbon emissions, but there is technology in place today that allows the capture and sequestration of those emissions. So it's a great way to make hydrogen.
Thanks, Andrew. And Roman, can we bring you into the conversation as well?
Sure thing. I think I'm going to be speaking from the perspective of S&P Global, and as S&P Global, we work with the hydrogen industry across the globe. I think obviously we work with players that are involved in steam methane reforming, but we are also paying a lot of attention to other approaches that use fossil fuels, things such as autothermal reforming. And if you go halfway around the world, you see that coal gasification is actually a very common way of creating hydrogen in places like China. And then when we look forward and we think about our other options, there's also technologies that we are tracking, technologies such as methane pyrolysis, and at least that could also be where CCS could be put to use. So we're not a player in this game, but we are actively tracking in terms of the manufacturing game, but we're actually tracking to help understand which of these technologies may end up playing out and which ones may end up being winners under different circumstances. So very interesting discussion.
Fantastic. Thanks for that all. And let's just dive in. So Brett introduced the Earthshot initiative, the DOE's Earthshot initiative, and the 1 by 1 by 1 challenge. That is to effectively reduce the cost of clean hydrogen to $1 per kilogram. So Roman, let's start with you first. And you surveyed the scene, as you said, for hydrogen globally at S&P Global. What challenges does that represent to get to $1 per kilogram?
I mean, I can say that when we saw the $1 per kilogram, you know, this was a game of leapfrog, because we were looking at what was going on in Europe. There were targets of $2, there were targets of $1.75, and DOE just blew through all of them and went with $1. So, you know, hats off to them for the ambition here. And it is, you know, it is a very ambitious target from what we see. For those of you who are not familiar, Platts, as a price reporting agency, we've launched hydrogen price assessments around the world, including in the U.S. Gulf Coast. So if we look at prices right now, if we look at Platts prices for electrolyzer produced hydrogen, and depending on the electrolyzer type, we're looking at around, you know, $2.50 to $3.50 to $4 per kilogram. So that is what our current Platts pricing is telling us, and we would need to get from those levels down to $1. If you look at our estimates of current technologies and assuming pretty strong 90% capacity factors, we essentially need to have power prices be zero at current technologies and at 90% capacity factors. Now, obviously, what DOE is doing is they're setting an objective. They're trying to push the technology, because no one expects that current technology prices are the ones that are going to be in play 10 years from now, let alone a year from now. So this is an ambitious goal, but it's one that is certainly going to push a lot of the players, the key players, to be able to meet.
Deia,
and I'd like to add to that, actually. So thank you, Roman. I mean, we welcome Earthshot. I mean, Earthshot, really, it is significant that the first initiative is focused on hydrogen already. And in Bloom, we recently hosted, actually, Secretary Granholm at our Aspire Forum. She's really certainly looking to the future and working to make that future as soon a reality. So the DOE goal of lowering the cost of hydrogen is aggressive, as Roman mentioned, but it is achievable with the right policies in place. And when we say the right policies, those are helping to scale, drive demand, provide clear regulatory rules for the road. As you know, all the developers, investors need just to know the rules for the next decade or 25 years of development they have. So for example, we can look at the scale of tax incentive of the production of hydrogen, which Senator Carver recently introduced with Clean Hydrogen Production Act. We are on the record, and even Andrew with Air Liquide are on the record supporting such legislation and driving forward with the Department of Energy. So it is ambitious. We believe it is really achievable, and we definitely welcome Earthshots, and really happy that with the significance of having hydrogen as one of the first initiatives there.
I think just one thing to add is, when we look at where we need to go, some of the policies that were just mentioned, policies on the Hill, and even policies by the administration in terms of tax credits. These are tax credits that, depending on the cleanliness of the hydrogen, can add either up to $3 per kilogram, according to the legislation, depending on the cleanliness. So there are levers that can make the difference here.
Very good. So, in thinking about the cleanliness or the colors, as our panel is actually titled even, let's talk about that a little bit. Should we be focused on the color, that is how the hydrogen is produced, or should we be focusing on the carbon intensity at this point? Trevor, can you weigh in on that for us?
Yeah, and I think a great way to state my position is to ask everyone on the call, or everyone listening in on the call, a question that you can ask yourself right now. What color is photocatalysis? And you know, straight up, we don't have a good color. Anything that I try and apply is an approximation. And so we can, make hydrogen from ammonia, which I've been calling green because I think it's the best, best approximation. But if you look at the definition of green, that is hydrogen from electrolysis. So I'm not sure if it's an exact fit. We can make hydrogen from methane, and we can also take the CO2 stream and turn it into a liquid product like methanol. What color is this? I'm not sure. I know that the carbon intensity is fantastically low, and the cost is fantastically low, but it does not fit into the current color scheme. So I think what is more important than color is that you actually do a life cycle assessment on the overall CO2 emitted across the entire life cycle of, hydrogen production, transmission, distribution. The reason why I think this is so important is we've become obsessed with this. We look at the carbon intensity of our feedstocks. We look at the carbon intensity of operating our system. And what we found is that it can change pretty dramatically. And when looking against other options for blue or green, we see that there are many, many different shades. If you capture 50% of your carbon dioxide, it is blue. If you capture 99% of your carbon dioxide, it is still blue. But the carbon intensity is very different. Green, if you are driving an electrolyzer with electricity from solar or wind or biomass, just gut check, do all these things have an identical carbon intensity? The answer is no. And so there are many, many different shades of green. Some of them are very, very good. And absolutely, we should be pouring tons of money into electrolysis around those pathways. And some of them are not very good at all, and we should probably be avoiding those. But whenever you just apply blanket colors, you can't tell which shade of green you're getting, which is why we are strong proponents of a life cycle carbon intensity that takes into account all the emissions from cradle to grave.
Herman, can you weigh in on what you see globally and how this is being thought about? Carbon intensity versus color, how it's produced?
No, it's a very interesting question, and right now I think Europe is in the middle of trying to figure out how they actually want to qualify their projects. I think, and the very interesting developments also in Australia, where an approach of guarantees of origin that where one can attribute the carbon intensity of where this hydrogen is coming from. In Platts's view, I think when we think about what we believe will be the most effective and probably the best way to promote hydrogen as a clean solution, it's to build up the hydrogen market as a hydrogen market and build up the carbon intensity market as a carbon intensity market, so that you really get the ability when people want to use hydrogen for a reason. There's the liquidity of markets, there's the ability to trade, the ability to procure it, and at the same time have an understanding and then be able to also procure the attributes that go along with it. So those attributes could be carbon intensity attributes or just as Trevor mentioned, taking into account this sort of full carbon intensity, because even when you talk about blue, you can have blue with natural gas, you can have blue hydrogen with renewable natural gas, and those can be two very different things. So I think all eyes now are there are going to be a number of very significant European policy announcements on July 14th, but there's been a lot leading up to it. I think we are going to be paying special attention to how both individual governments decide to incentivize new clean hydrogen facilities, and as well as how the European Union is going to be doing that. And obviously Australia is another leader in this case. I think there are lessons to be learned from those regions, and I think there are ways in which the U.S. is also leading in this, and we're looking to also look at the LCFS in California and other pathways that are creating credits for the LCFS as being able to provide that sort of information.
Great. So I think thus far we've done a good job in kind of level setting around production, carbon intensity. Let's do our future back process that Brett talked about, and we're gonna earth shock to 2030. And so here we are in 2030. We have a low carbon, low cost hydrogen market. And so kind of the question is, how did we get here? So I want to turn that, what are the innovations that got us here? And I want to turn that question to Kathy first. And we'll hear from several of our panelists on this. Kathy?
Yeah, so first of all, I think that in 2030, we're going to see a broad mix of technology. So I think that's the first thing to recognize off the bat, is that there is no one technology that's probably going to be optimal for every single application. So I think it was Roman was saying earlier, there's going to be different winners under different circumstances. But if I think about electrolysis specifically, I think a lot of the innovations are going to be in manufacturing to really get to the lower usage of materials and lower labor to drive the capital cost down and the efficiency up. We already know that the fuel cells have gone through this pathway, and so there's a lot of learning that we can get from those processes in terms of automation of coatings, things like reduction in labor as we go to roll type processes, getting to higher efficiencies by using thinner membranes and getting rid of a lot of the expensive catalyst materials. So that's where I think the innovation is going to happen on the electrolyzer side, as well as in power electronics to decrease the cost of the rectifiers.
Deia, do you want to?
Yeah, definitely. Yes.
2030 looking down.
Yes, thank you. So to complement Kathy's and Roman, I agree, there will be multiple technologies depending on the application and the circumstances that we really have to collaborate because it's there. We need collaboration. One company, one organization will not build a hydrogen economy of a scale alone. So we need to see complementary technology and initiative together. One key part, if you're thinking about what we need to do now to get there, with the cost of electricity being the greatest cost factor in hydrogen production through electrolysis right now, innovation will have to focus on efficiency. Efficiency will be a really key for us enabler to really get there. So efficiency means efficiency of the solid oxide fuel cell with the high temperature we have and capturing any byproducts like carbon, like heat, and really repurpose those to really get almost 100% efficiency. Efficiency means that we really get also efficiency in manufacturing to get the highest reliability, the highest scale, and really get this product really to be much more reliable as old existing technology right now. So examples in Bloom, for example, we're working with Idaho National Lab where we demonstrate further increased efficiency with the input of the scheme to our electrolyzer now. We also teamed up, for example, with local in Houston, Baker Hughes, on a number of initiatives to integrate really their combined cycle compressor with our electrolyzer. So that's integration of best-in-class technologies, out-of-the-box thinking collaboration is going to drive innovation and solution in the future and get us to the hydrogen efficient economy. So this is how I think about it. 2030, what we'll be doing now to get there.
That Deia. So then let's pivot to Trevor. Can you tell us a little bit about, you've talked about your innovation at Syzygy. So you want to talk to us about what innovations do you see if you're in 2030 looking back?
So I think this is a great time to add some balance into the conversation because I see a lot of hyperbole in the markets thinking that one solution is going to dominate. And if you look at the energy mix of planet Earth today, and you look, going back 100 years, the energy mix has always been highly varied. What is it going to take? It's going to take all of us working together. There is no single technology that will dominate every application in every geography. There are going to be places on Earth where electricity is abundant and extremely low cost, and electrolysis will dominate in those areas. There are going to be areas on Earth, like there are today, where electricity isn't as cheap, and technologies like Syzygy are going to dominate in those areas. We kind of fit this niche. We use about 4 times less electricity than electrolysis, but we use quite a bit more than like a traditional SMR, for example. So this middle ground where electricity price is in the mid-range, and there's going to be areas where electricity is very expensive and they have abundant natural gas where SMR and other technologies will dominate. So all of these things working together is going to take scale. A lot of the things that we talk about with manufacturing efficiencies and R&D improvements, like these all get driven by scale. As we scale up, more money gets poured in. Scale, I think, is going to be driven a lot by government and regulatory support. So, what you see with all these hydrogen roadmaps, hydrogen policies that are coming out across the world, we need more and more of that. We need continued support. A really great allegory, I think, would be if you look at the rise of renewables, solar goes back to the 70s, and it took decades of regulatory support and subsidies before solar really started to break the cost curves. I imagine for the future clean energy economy, it's going to be quite similar. So we're starting to see that support come into play, more of that, everyone working together, and we absolutely can make this happen.
Thanks for that, Trevor. So Andrew, can you weigh in if we're in 2030, how did we get here? What innovations got us here?
Sure, thank you, Nichelle. So I would point out that 2030 is only 9 years away. So I would start, when innovation comes to mind for me, is I would say we need to start off of building off of the existing infrastructure in Houston and Texas. And it's important to note that we have hundreds of miles of pipelines today. We have many, many sources of hydrogen today. Air Liquide happens to have the world's largest hydrogen storage cavern in Port Arthur, Texas today. So I would say starting with some of that infrastructure, and then I agree with my panelists, working in collaboration, industry, working together to create an effective system of gathering and sequestering large volumes of carbon off of the way that hydrogen is made today. That would definitely be something that we would need to get there in 2030. And then just to add in one other point, I think building off of what others said, a push and pull of incentives and regulations to encourage this scale, to encourage industry to put in these huge investments to create this thriving market. We're going to need to see support in that way.
Thanks for that, Andrew. And thanks for also re-injecting Houston and the Houston region back in, because that's where we want to go next. And effectively, what are the implications then for Houston? Again, 2030, we're in 2030. Things have gone well. We've got low cost, low carbon hydrogen market. So what does that mean for Houston? Roman, let's start with you on this question.
Yeah, I mean, I think I want to touch upon what Andrew said, and it's we've all talked about hydrogen production and the cost of hydrogen production. The DOE's initiative is about hydrogen production, but if you go to if you wanted to buy retail hydrogen and compare that price to the hydrogen production price, the challenge is really in another major challenge is in the distribution, the transport, and the storage, and that's going to some of the points that Andrew was saying, and that this goes into the infrastructure story, which is a key buzzword nowadays anyway, and this is really where Houston shines. It's first of all with the current infrastructure that is almost unique in the world in terms of being able to transport hydrogen. It's the availability. If you think about, if we go back to the world of low cost power. I mean, I mentioned you need zero cost power under current technologies. Well, there are times, and this is as soon as you continue to ramp up renewables, as you continue to decarbonize the power sector, there will be more and more hours of extremely low cost power and even negative cost power, which can also provide opportunities. And Texas is really at the forefront of this. If you think about what states in the U.S. and what regions are really leading in terms of uptake of wind and solar, it's really Texas is leading there as well. So it's almost like an abundance of riches, where you think about which one of these great options do you go with, because these are options that many other parts of the world are not blessed with, and this is the exciting part of this discussion, because does Texas have, does the Houston region, are there low cost renewables? Sure. Is there low cost natural gas? Sure. Is there an ability to sequester the CO2? Sure. Is there even infrastructure which no one else has? Sure. So I mean, it's an exciting place for Houston to be.
As a Houston native, that makes me very happy. Trevor, can I get you to weigh into the same question of what does this mean for Houston and more broadly Texas?
Yeah, and so I think a good way to look at this is threats and opportunities. And something that I think about a lot in this is that Houston is based around energy, and energy is a very old industry. If you look at the creation and distribution of things like fuel and chemicals, and it really hasn't changed a whole lot in 100 years. It is very ripe for disruption. There are numerous stories from the past 2 decades of industries that have been disrupted, and you have these stalwart players that have been around for decades that don't think it's going to happen quickly. I think the single biggest threat to Houston is that we don't fully embrace the energy transition, or we don't do it fast enough. We wait for the change to come before we start building the infrastructure. We wait until the change is happening. With change, you can either be affected or you can be the one controlling it. We have an opportunity right now to be the leader. And I think if we embrace that opportunity and start to deploy the infrastructure now, start to deploy the investments now, I think that it will pay off and we will affect the change, and we can keep Houston as the energy capital of the world, for the next 100 years. What does it mean for Texas? Texas is one of the strongest, the most quickly growing economies in the world. And I think that we have the opportunity to get that 10x going here for the energy transition.
Thanks for that, Trevor. And certainly I think all the guests, the attendees are certainly hoping to do that, just jumpstart Houston's place and continuing to be a leader. Andrew, can you weigh in on the question of, what are the impacts and implications for Houston?
Sure, absolutely. And I want to build off of what Roman and Trevor said. I think Houston is off to a great head start. Roman really hit a lot of the major points, but we've got the infrastructure in place. We have the knowledgeable workforce that's worked on hydrogen for decades. We have a business-friendly city and state, which is absolutely critical. And then we hit on this. We have world competitive energy costs and access in all the different energy forms, and including, of course, renewables. So major head start. I would like to just maybe agree with Trevor that what's the threat, if we want to say opportunities and threats. We have this huge head start, but we need to be willing to adapt what we have now, and we need to be willing to work together. And we talked about that already. We have to, this is too large of a problem for just one success. We need many successes, and that requires us all pushing in the same direction and all being successful.
So pulling that thread a little further, then what are those strategic opportunities that we have here in Houston, here in the region, to really grow the hydrogen market? Deia, let's start with you. So we've talked about kind of some of the implications. All of the panelists have touched on that a bit. What are some of the strategic opportunities, things that we should be looking at?
So what we should be looking at, in my view, 3 dimensions. You have Houston, as the team mentioned here, that have existing infrastructure already. We have in Houston, the capital of the energy of the world, strong position to decarbonize existing resources, industry expertise, location for exports. You really have the perfect place to start really growing and showing the leadership. The 3 dimensions I see is, one is policies. So we need to have policies help the scale, drive demand, drive clear regulations. That actually comes from the federal level, comes from the state level, but comes also from the local regulation level. Demonstration is another key that we can now start working on. You have different companies, different collaboration. We can start with blending of hydrogen to the existing natural gas infrastructure, eventually demonstration of leading network dedicated to hydrogen. Collaboration is the 3rd dimension that, like the whole team and we all mentioned, one company, one organization will not build this hydrogen economy standalone. So we need to seek the complementary technologies initiatives. So policies, demonstration, collaboration, I think will be the way to really build it and really initiate it in a significant way and lead the way towards the future of energy around the globe as well.
Kathy, can you weigh in on that as well? Some of the strategic opportunities here in Houston?
Yeah, I think Deia touched on a lot of the same ones, I would say, just to maybe spin them slightly differently. I think there are opportunities kind of from along the whole product chain. So a lot of these technologies are still becoming more gaining in manufacturing maturity and scale, and there's going to be a lot of opportunities for supply chain to grow in the US. So, encouraging companies to site businesses in that area. And as Deia mentioned, also all the way up through demonstration and deployment, there's going to need to be first demonstrations to show that these technologies can meet the targets that we're setting, and then further deployment in places where it makes sense, which Houston being one of them with the existing solar and wind and hydrogen infrastructure. It makes a lot of sense to start siting a lot of hydrogen generation there.
Very good. Trevor, you have additional things to add there for the strategic opportunities?
I mean, I'm probably just going to be taking a victory lap and repeating what everybody else said, but I think that there is value in it. Like Houston has an enviable, access to renewable energy. It's got enviable access to natural gas and chemical infrastructure. We are quite uniquely positioned on the entire planet in our ability to make this happen. I'm starting to see, real excitement from the local government, the city of Houston. I'm starting to see real excitement from industry and embracing this change. The opportunities are huge. Not only that, we have incredible access to talent, around how to work with and move hydrogen and produce hydrogen. We have incredible access to trade, probably more than anywhere else in the US. Our ability to make hydrogen here and ship it out to the rest of the world is very high. The potential that we are looking at is enormous. And so, now's the time. We're excited. Two other things I'd like to call out are, Deia mentioned, demonstration. And, to anyone on the call, and pardon for the shameless Syzygy plug here, to anyone on the call that would help Syzygy, demonstrate our technology at a scale in Houston, like now is absolutely the time to talk to us. We want to help enable this transition, and this is a huge opportunity for both of us. And then finally, complementary technologies. When you look at what hydrogen can go into, ammonia, methanol, things like this, the chemical infrastructure, the refining infrastructure here to make use of that hydrogen is also exceptionally high.
And if I can just piggyback on something Trevor said, I think the exciting thing is that Houston can really be a leader here. And the way we look at it at Platts is they can be a leader in hydrogen markets. I mean, the entire world is asking, okay, well, we get this. We're trying to figure out how to engage, but there's, when will a real kind of open, transparent market start? And Platts is working towards providing information in that space. Houston has all the pieces to be the first kind of really open, transparent, traded hydrogen market. And to the points that have been made otherwise is like, this has every potential to be a global market. This is, there is the potential to ship hydrogen, ammonia, pick your medium. And there would be demand for this. So it's there's real, in our view, there's real opportunity for Houston to be a world leader in terms of developing these sort of transparent global markets.
And let me put one more thing out there. When you think about natural gas, you think about the Henry Hub. When you're buying ammonia, you do it based off the Tampa price. If we move now, when people talk about hydrogen, they could talk about the Houston price. And we have the opportunity to do that.
That's great. That's great. So now let's think about what it takes to get there, a step further. We talked a lot about cross-cutting kind of initiatives already to this point. There's policy kind of on all levels, federal, state, local. There's, whether that's tax incentives, like other incentives and credits that could be put in place. We've talked about infrastructure and the needs that are there. Workforce has been mentioned. So now we were in 2030, we did our future back. Let's come, 9 years. Let's come back and say, so what does that mean for right now? Especially thinking about those cross-cutting initiatives, those things that require the collaboration that you've all spoken about to actually achieve this low-cost hydrogen market in Houston. So first, let me actually, I want to ask you all that question. And Kathy, I think I'll start with you.
Sure. So I think some of the tax credits are extremely important to get some of these markets kickstarted. But I also think a big one that we've mentioned but not talked a lot about is the workforce development piece. So there are huge opportunities, I think, for jobs as these markets grow, both at the manufacturer and where these systems are deployed. So if I look at our current business, we employ a lot of mechanical and electrical technicians in terms of assembling the units, also people who are doing laboratory work and handling chemical processes. And then when these units are deployed, we also have service technicians and technicians on site who are managing the operation of these. And so I think, you know, getting that training in place and figuring out how we can do that, and a lot of those skills are going to be somewhat cross-industry, will really help, because we're going to have a large problem getting all the employees we need otherwise.
Yeah, thanks for that, Kathy. Certainly very important to the workforce and the economy and the employment here in Houston. Deia, can you also weigh in on the cross-cutting initiatives, be it policy, workforce, collaboration across innovators, and the like?
Yeah, absolutely. Similar to what Kathy and the team said, I mentioned the 3 dimensions. We need policies to help the scale drive demand and clear regulations. We need demonstration to show blending and really actual technology working across the board. We need to show collaboration between different technologies, the complementary technology initiatives. I think what we need to do actually is we start acting now. We need to take the action right now. We need to make sure we don't fall behind in innovation of electrolyzer and the rest of the enabler for the hydrogen economy and other technology manufacturing, because you talked about jobs, you talked about people, economy, manufacturing will go where the market is. So we really need to act now in enablement of all of those 3 dimensions, is start really building it now, is start really driving it now. For example, I mean, similar to what the team mentioned in Bloom, we're really driving really hard the manufacturing scalability. We're driving really the efficiency. We're driving really the fuel cell technology toward this hydrogen, carbon capture, heat capture, really zero carbon in general. So I think the one thing we really need to make sure it happens, and I think Andrew or Roman said it's 2030 is only 9 years away. We need to take the action now on the 3 dimension, and we start acting together collaboratively.
Thanks for that, Deia. So Trevor, you want to weigh in? You've shared your passion, certainly.
I mean, they have all my fellow panelists on this have given, you know, really fantastic feedback. So to just like be quick about it, you know, we need to move now, embrace the transition, you know, workforce development, make use of existing infrastructure while also focus on building out that new infrastructure for 2030 and beyond. You know, regulatory support, don't put all our eggs in one basket. There is no silver bullet. Focus on a portfolio of technologies that can achieve low life cycle carbon emissions over just color, where the life cycle carbon emissions aren't visible.
Thanks for that, Trevor. And Andrew, thinking about the cross-cutting initiatives.
Sure, thank you. So I maybe one point we haven't touched on, I might just briefly talk about safety and the knowledge of the workforce and making sure that from today, right now, we keep applying industry-leading knowledge to prevent any kind of incidents that would potentially sway public opinion. I think that's always going to be important. But then my fellow panelists really talked on some key points. Bluntly speaking, we need to make the economics work. And I don't think you can do that just from a push, if we use that word, of taxes. And I don't think you can do that just from a pull of incentives. We really need a mix. Starting now, the Earthshot is a great start, by the way, but really a mix of those things, push and pull, to drive the industry and the economics to make sense. And then you'll see when economics works, you see thriving markets, that's for sure. And I think Deia said this, I really like the point about those need to be consistent over time. They can't be up and down and fluctuating. We need to see consistency of that push and pull for the next 5 years, 10 years and beyond.
Thanks for that, Andrew. So there's a lot of agreement across our panel. Roman, I'm going to turn to you. I think that's the last perspective we'll get in before our time is up. So cross-cutting, these broader things that we need to tackle now.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned it before, we kind of see our role in being able to provide both the information and the transparency. You know, if people want to be able to make investment decisions, they need to know, first of all, what are the prices going to be? Where are the likely opportunities? Where is the low cost power? Where is the low cost gas? Where are other people putting their hydrogen facilities? Where is the storage? We have we've launched a global hydrogen production asset database where we track all the announcements, what technologies are being used, and overlay that on the infrastructure system. These are the kind of decisions that that when you start putting the metal to the road, or the rubber to the road, you kind of need to know all this data, all these information to be able to make these decisions well. And also to understand the competition, because in many ways we haven't really mentioned it yet, but if we think about what hydrogen can provide, the flip side is if we go to a power conference, there's going to be power people that are going to say, well, yeah, we can do that, we can do that, we can do that. So really identifying and having the information to identify, these are the real opportunities where hydrogen has a right to win. And that's what kind of Platts and S&P Global try to provide, is the information to be able to make those decisions.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Roman, and thank you, panelists. I think we're about at time now. So I want to turn it back over to Brett. Hopefully it's been a great discussion around hydrogen production, and our guests have learned quite a bit from the discussion.
Well, Nichelle, thanks a lot. You've really crystallized what some of the main issues are. Here's some of the things I learned from the discussion. First, this isn't going to be one winner. There's going to be many types of technologies. And I think the perspectives that we heard really from across the value chain, from electrolysis to what Syzygy is doing as a startup company, to the opportunities that we have with low-cost hydrogen from SMR. All those have opportunities for Houston. The other thing that we heard that I thought was pretty interesting was it's not just the production of hydrogen, it's really the distribution and the marketing. It's all the way down through the value chain, and we really have some opportunities in Houston because we have this huge infrastructure system really to be that low-cost provider, and that's really an opportunity that I heard. I did hear that, the threat that we have is if we don't move fast enough, that the time is now, that we have to embrace this transition, that companies were going to go where the market is. And it's interesting that a lot of the companies on the last panel are not in Houston today, or not in Texas. Bloom, which started out of NASA, is primarily in California, but could be in Houston. Hopefully, Deia, this will be an incentive to be here soon, because we need to embrace that vision, and hopefully we'll get you to believe where the market is. The same with Nell and electrolysis. These are places, these are companies that we need to embrace the vision that we have. And then finally, the cross-cutting opportunities, I think those are clear. The push and pull of incentives, the demonstration projects, working on workforce, and not to forget the safety issues. Those are all things that we in Houston and the Center for Houston's Future and the Greater Houston Partnership need to work on together in order to create this vision that we think the future can bring. So very good panel. Thank you very much to the panelists and Nichelle for bringing those points together. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back shortly.